Okay, I think you're live now. Okay. Yeah, let's do this. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Exchange with Williams. As those of you who already know Williams, he's a good guy. So I know we're going to have a lot of fun today learning from him and asking your question. So we're going to use the chat on right on YouTube for the question. So if you're here and you have a question, you just drop it inside the chat, and when we get to the Q&A, we'll go over those questions and answer. So again, Williams, thank you for accepting to share your experiences with that. We are very happy to have you here today. And I'll leave you to introduce yourself to us. Some of us know you, others also don't know you. So benefit of those who don't know you and how who you are, I'd like you to tell us a little bit about yourself so that we get to know you.
Sure. So, like you've already introduced me, my name is Williams Edu. I'm a senior consultant with Andela. I'm married, not with kids yet, but hopefully, maybe. And I love coding. I feel happy when I see that people are solving their problems with code, and just love making friends. That's a little about me.
Okay, cool. So how did this start for you? Programming. How did this craft? How did it get into programming? Was your light bulb moment?
Okay, so I would say the changing moment was in 2009. I think I had a visit from a friend at home, and then that guy was in a university. Then I was like, "Oh, cool. So what are the most like fun projects you've been working on?" And then he showed me a calculator. I was like, "Man, you can build a calculator?" I look at my computer every day, and I wonder how things are built in the computer. So like, how did you go about this? So he went through the whole project and then started showing me how he used Visual Studio. I think around that time it was 206 or some, see, I think that particular version. And then he showed me his code, how he put things together, how he did a drag and drop for the then Windows Forms application, and how he tried to have like a suite of apps. I was like, this is amazing. I really want to know how you did it. So he said, "Oh, you'd have to go to the university to learn this." I'm like, "No, is there no way around it?" So he said, "Okay, perhaps you may have to surf the internet." So I was like, "Okay, fine. I'll find my own way of like achieving this." So from then I started going online. I started reading books. Started reading stuff from MSDN. That's Microsoft's documentation page. It was a little cumbersome, but I dug my way through. I went to get a PC. I installed Visual Studio, and I started like diving into Visual Basic and then trying to get stuff done. So I would say that was basically the turning moment for me.
Cool. So I mean, it was. I have a similar style. Yeah. But so, what are your hobbies? What do you do for fun? And maybe if you're not behind the computer, what are the sort of
So when I'm free, I game a lot. So I do FIFA with my junior bro or anybody who is good around me. And then I used to love table tennis, but now I don't play as much as I used to in the past. Other times I just take my wife out and then we go out walking, visiting friends, chatting, like playing outside. When it's too stressful for me, I just go to the live band and enjoy myself with good music and dance my stress off.
and lately, have you stumbled on something that you find very interesting that you like to share with us?
As in, can you be specific?
I mean, it could be anything that has to do with work or has to do with fun. We are open to learning, fun stuff.
So fun. Let's see. What is fun? What is fun? What is fun? Uh okay, I don't know. I'm still looking for a challenger in FIFA. So if anybody's on board and we can arrange like a weekend, I don't mind coming over, or I don't mind moving to a place where we can get visibility and then have like a fine FIFA match. That is one of the things I can say. There's been moments where I felt like I wasn't good enough, and I was shocked by how well people said I was good. I was like, whoa, I never knew I was this good. So those were fun moments because I had to stay low, and then people had to bring me up. Kind of
Okay,
like,
so for me, gaming has always been very challenging for me because I feel like I suck at it a lot, and it makes me interest. And I used to
Ah,
when I was at the university, I used to play Need for Speed, and I always used to suck at it. And
ah,
then yeah, you see, even
oh
Need for Speed,
man,
I didn't really have that.
you.
Like, you see, one very interesting thing was I like to play Need for Speed, but anytime I was playing it, I was more interested in crashing it than actually driving and getting to my destination. It was just silly. It was just silly. So,
I
but
see.
I always had tough times and sticking to a game and getting interested, and yeah, maybe I wouldn't the gamification aspect of it didn't really get to me, and
Yeah,
so I'm not really a fan of games. Yeah.
I see. I see.
So
I normally enjoy trashing people in FIFA, like scoring. Like I think the highest I've scored someone was like 7-1 or 7-2, I guess. And I was really proud of myself, man.
then again, I'm not a football kind of guy, so maybe that's why I'll probably never get interested in FIFA.
Okay, cool.
So maybe you might be able to help me with my gaming issues when I don't want to play games. Yeah, maybe you'll be able to.
Let's
So
see.
yeah, so back to our conversation. As a software engineer or as a programmer or as a developer, depending on what mood you're in. So what will you say have been some of the times that you were down or you weren't so great about the fact that you were a software engineer or more importantly you're a problem solver? Do you have some down times or times that you didn't really feel yourself or you didn't really feel like you made a good choice, getting into programming?
Yeah, there were a few. I think initially when I started programming, I started with the intention of becoming an entrepreneur, right? So the goal was to learn the craft and then start solving certain problems that I have identified in my little community. So I kind of like thought about a lot of things, but at some points it was difficult. So it's like, how can I do this and earn money? And I was new into entrepreneurship, so it was a little tough. So the first step, or the ideal way many people will go, is like, okay, let me join a company and then work as a full-time person there, gain extra experience, and then probably get some money, right? But in this country, it's very appalling sometimes that even when good developers are on board, some companies, the financial remunerations are not kind of like okay. So for me, those were mostly my down moments. When I started with these companies, I wasn't paid well. There were times when my pay would just not come, and I would just lose my motivation to give in my all, also like during the work. And then there were also times when some bugs in my life have like made me really, really, really miserable. I was like, why can't I get this thing to work? Why can't I get this thing to work? I can tell you one experience. Like there was a time when I was architecting something on Azure, and then the solution I was supposed to connect the Azure instance that I had to like something like a new 4J Graphene DB instance. So I was like, okay, let me just do this. And I just couldn't find out why the thing was not working. It took me like 2 days, and I was like, man, I was so down. I just couldn't know how to do it by myself. I'm like, why did I get into this craft? Why didn't I go teach people how to say dance or fish or farm or something like awkward? Like I'll just say those were some of the down moments that I've experienced in this career.
So with your bag, how did you get around it, or you never found the solution?
I had missed something very small. So, whilst copying credentials, I had deleted the last letter. And basically, I was wondering why I've copied everything. I was like, so whilst copying, some things were stacking. I had to scroll in, and I had forgotten to just pick the last character. So after realizing, I was like, man, this is something.
Alright.
This is just part of the craft.
So, what about some of the happy moments? What times you do feel so great about yourself about the career that you have chosen?
Yeah. So one happy moment I will talk of was when I got accepted by Andela. I was so happy, and one of the reasons why I felt so happy was even though I had played so many roles here locally, I never felt I was like on that senior level. So especially when I was told during the interview process that I'm going to have like a technical assessment by someone senior, someone I had gone through their profile and knew the person had like around close to 10 years of experience. I was like, man, will I really, really meet this? And then after I went through that, I also told again, I'm going to meet other people who are really higher in the company. I was like, I didn't know whether I would really meet like that particular bar. But after going through the whole process and being offered, I was like, this is awesome. I felt really, really happy. And another moment was when I worked with a partner in New York, and then I was supposed to build like a project for them. They had a legacy application, and it had bugged them a lot. And one of the BAs like talked to me and said, "Okay, we would want you to work on a silo project, and in this silo project, we would want you to do something about legacy applications." So when I gave them my solution, it became like an epic for the company, at least for the next week. And those were happy moments, at least for me.
Oh. So, have you? I know. Earlier on, you mentioned or you said something about entrepreneurship. I don't know. Can you talk more about how your experience being or attempting to be an entrepreneur, how it has been like?
Yeah, so good. Like it's really a good question. Yeah, I see. For me, entrepreneurship has been a journey. I wouldn't say I'm like the one. Like I'm at the level I actually want to be. But when I started, it started like in a much more difficult fashion. What happened was I started my own company with a few friends, and I was supposed to bring up some few solutions. So we started working on the solution. The solution was working. We had prototypes, and we were like, "Oh, go man, this is gonna work." And then we went to the market, and it failed. So we tried the market, and we had just around 10 people subscribing or getting onto the product, and everybody else said there were issues. They started comparing our product to other people, and it was very tough. Okay, we were like, okay, then let's iterate further and get things in shape. And to be able to get better iteration and better understanding of the whole thing, we realized that we didn't have enough resources, which like in terms of money, and the team lacked lots of experience with respect to leadership itself. So we kind of had to put the whole like startup idea on hold, and that was one of the low moments. Also, we kind of like put that one out, and then I started a different startup like 2015 with another friend, and I was like, okay, this solution is supposed to work because I had kind of seen like the problem, and I was like, okay, let's work towards solving this problem. We worked on that as well, and the idea got stolen by a bigger like company that's heard about the whole idea, and then they started making the money, and my company crashed from there. So I was like, this is really horrible for me. But there were two things I learned from these two experiences. One was that you don't just start up a company, right? There are a few things that go into starting up a company. One is the leadership aspects, one is the experience, and the fact that you need to do something we call customer validation. So I kind of was so curious about this. And so when I ventured into one company, I worked with, I think, Cambridge Center in 2015. I started researching into customer validation. I started attending conferences where I would at least gain more information about customer validation to learn how to validate my ideas with my potential customers and see whether it has like very good market fit. Another idea I also learned was to start up a company, you don't just have to get to it, right? You need resources, and one of the things that we may need is like money. And so it wouldn't make sense to put yourself through the struggle and then come back later and say you're going to make it. It doesn't work like that. This experience really enriched me. It really helped me, and then it has really shaped some of my ideas. So currently, I'm working on a new startup with my wife, and what we are doing is more like an e-commerce business. And I'm kind of like iterating, bringing on board all these findings that I've actually had. I've also kind of during the whole process scheduled like calls and discussions and chats with potential investors to gain the investor mindset when it comes to putting money into businesses, just to learn a lot. So this is one of the things I always do on the side, trying to iterate some of the these learnings and knowledge, and then putting them into some of the new things I'm trying to bring out. But I generally wouldn't say my startup experience has been awesome. Like I just took off and then made it. No, I'm still in the process of learning how to uh, bring up like more productive startups and something that will be more useful. that validates well or that resonates well with the customer base, and that has a very good market fit.
Stuff, really cool stuff. Yeah, so what I want to know now is what is your favorite programming language?
I get asked that question a lot. I'm like, I don't have any. I don't like the idea of saying I don't have a favorite programming language because it will mean that I try every programming language, right? And that is really insane. So I've worked with teams where we have worked with certain stacks and have had to master those like stacks along the way, and I've gotten used to those stacks. So I would say I would prefer normally working on the .NET stacks, preferably C Sharp, and then I also do like full scale JS. So for both backend and front end, but there has been projects that have come like along the way where I've used something like Python, and then on the side I've also gone into that for a while, but I haven't actually done that on a full scale project. So it's like once in a while I pick up something and I try to learn and I try to implement something small. Sometimes I discard these projects. The other times I put them on my GitHub profile. But basically, I would say for now I work full time with .NET projects in then JS projects.
Okay. So how is your development environment like? I know if you're dabbling in the .NET, ecosystem, you're already working with IDs from Microsoft and stuff like that. Can you take us through or walk us through how or what IDs you're using and how or some of the personalizations that you've done in your IDs?
Yeah, yeah, cool. So for now, I work with anytime I work with a .NET project, like my go-to IDE is to use Visual Studio. That's like I currently work with Visual Studio 2017, and then that is basically the minimum setup for my .NET projects. When I'm on the JavaScript environment, that is a little different. It depends on which kind of project I'm working on. If it is an SPA, either React or Angular, I have written my own custom development environment, which I kind of always want to start with, like in terms of boilerplates that I actually want to make sure it reminds me of everything I need. And I mostly code my JS projects in VS Code, get my linters and everything in place, and then that should be it.
So VS Code, you're still in the Microsoft, all
Of
this
course, man, they are really the big guys, and it pays to use
stuff.
their products.
So I know now Microsoft has recently acquired GitHub. I mean, how do you feel about that? Being a Microsoft, fan.
I can feel the fear behind, right? And it makes sense. At least people who knew Microsoft, say 10 years ago, or probably even more, I'd say 15 years ago, may think of Microsoft as a profit-loving company. You don't care what they actually implement to make profit. But I would say ever since Satya Nadella took over Microsoft of late, things have changed. And one of those changes that I can talk of is the fact that Microsoft is going more into open source. So GitHub actually attests to the fact that Microsoft is their number one company when it comes to contributions to open source. And then Microsoft has been launching lots of very cool projects like porting the full-blown ASP thing to the .NET Core approach, where you can now write a .NET application in your Linux and in Mac without necessarily trying to get Microsoft stuffy things around. So you can write like your ASP.NET Core applications directly with your with the Linux with any particular, and then that should work well for you. And then they're also trying to port a few other things. One of the things I love that they've also brought in is the .NET Standard, which kind of brings the whole Microsoft .NET ecosystem into a single box that you can actually work with. That's very cool. Service Fabric is Microsoft's way of saying, okay, this is how we did microservices, and we are giving the whole thing to the open source community. That's like something very, very, very awesome. So I feel like Microsoft is contributing a lot to open source, and they are really there to help companies be more productive. So their purchase for GitHub is just one of the things that they can do. But I feel like when I look at what Microsoft did with LinkedIn, it has been positive, right? I wouldn't say LinkedIn has gone back after Microsoft acquired them. It has been very positive, lots of revenue, lots of cool stuffs coming up. And so Microsoft acquiring GitHub is still something I see as a positive move. And I'm looking forward to some of the good things that are going to come out of that.
Okay, so for me, in the experience that I've had with C Sharp and the .NET runtime. It was a while back when I was doing ASP MVC. Yeah, I don't know. So you're saying that if I want to work on a web application with ASP MVC, I can use .NET Core to do that?
Yes. So here's the case. If you had worked with ASP.NET MVC 3, 4, and 5, what happened was as they were going through the individual versions, they were trying to get things like way cooler, right? But when they got to 4, they had gotten into a state of equilibrium. I would say .NET MVC was now very cool and was working very well for any .NET guy, right? But when they launched ASP.NET MVC 5, the one they called VNext, they started realizing that they could now port everything. They could now make everything in .NET modular, and they could now remove the heavier runtime that lies like behind the whole ASP.NET thing, and then they can now port everything into different OSs, right? So if you had written ASP.NET MVC before, you shouldn't worry. The same boilerplate can work in ASP.NET Core. There are a few changes because now you are running everything on Kestrel as a web server, preferably, or you may use something else. But now everything is modular, so you can say, okay, I want the MVC package, I want this, I want that, I want this, I want that, and it should fit in correctly. So now it's like everyone can now hop onto it. If you've done Node.js, you shouldn't worry, especially people who do Express and they want to do something like Express in terms of MVC. They try to treat Express in MVC, will find writing code in ASP.NET Core very much familiar. It's not anything different. The other thing is the familiarity with C# as a programming language.
Okay, okay, cool. So I know as an engineer or developer, learning is core to the work that, yeah. What I'm curious about now is how you approach learning. How do you learn as an engineer? What's your what's your process like? And can it is something that somebody watching can learn or can adopt to also quickly ramp up on things that he needs to know on the job?
Yeah, so I can share a few. So this is what happened. I didn't do computer science at the university. I did telecommunications engineering. And in
Okay.
telecommunications engineering, even though there's an aspect of programming, it is not as much as the CS students are doing, right? So my journey as a developer or a software engineer is basically self-taught. It's something I picked up from the internet. One of the things I normally do is that I have active subscriptions. So like currently I have an active subscription with Pluralsight. I occasionally like move through Udemy to see if there's a course that interests me a lot. And then I play a lot at YouTube. So I'm interested in how people did small chunks of things in YouTube. Then I sit down, draw the boxes on papers to see how I can put everything together to build like get a bigger application. Then I start to say get a project out, right? So one way to get a project out is that I avoid doing meaningless projects. So for instance, I will never build an application and say I'm building a function, just a single function, and I'm testing how to write functions. It doesn't make sense for me. So I try to sit down and I picture a particular environment, like a particular scenario. Then I'd say, okay, how would I use my knowledge in this area, something I've learned just not long ago, to get this thing solved. Then I try to build it up. So I can talk through a process of how I learned SOA architecture. So I had heard people talk about microservices, service oriented architecture. It was like too many bars. I was like, okay, how do I get into it? So I went to Pluralsight, found a very good course. Then I scheduled myself for like 3 days to finish that particular course. Then once I was done with that course, I had taken enough notes. I put the notes together. Then I kind of got my thoughts in shape, picked a paper, and then started drawing like the whole architecture of something I wanted to solve. So I had built a few projects before, and I just picked one of those projects and then architected the whole thing on the SOA platform. I said, okay, now I've learned SOA, I've learned microservices. Okay, how can I put these things into Kubernetes? How can I use Docker around these things? How can I do Service Fabric around these things? How can I do Mesos like around these things? So I start asking myself these other questions, and I start putting the same application with these different orchestrators or with these different other platforms to see how I can employ the same thing here and there and there and there. That way, I try to build on top of my knowledge and I try to get things done. And I can see how I can actually benchmark against things. Sometimes I simulate my own load locally and see how much the whole system I've architected is faring with respect to the load. But it all comes from practicing, so I can gain the experience after picking the knowledge.
Okay, cool. So I think when you're talking about a platform that you use to study, you mentioned Pluralsight, you mentioned Udemy, and I need to remind you that Pluralsight is a paid. Most of the content over there is paid. Yeah. And so if you're watching and you're eyeing Pluralsight, you're going to put on some bucks. Yeah. So do you have any free alternatives that you can help people who can currently can afford to pay for a subscription on Pluralsight or Udemy?
I'd say YouTube. That's my
YouTube.
simplest answer. Yeah.
Yeah, YouTube
Everything
is
is
the
on YouTube. I've seen it like all too often that everything is on YouTube.
yeah. I mean, even this conversation is also going to end up on YouTube. So YouTube
Funny
is not.
enough.
Yeah, and so personally, I really have an aversion for Udemy. I don't know when that aversion came about, but there was a time that I felt that the content on Udemy wasn't really, the quality wasn't that high. So I lost interest in it. In your experience, how do you vet courses on Udemy, and what are some of the things that you look out for when you are making a course selection on Udemy before actually paying for that course?
Yeah, so on Udemy, I'm not mostly interested in the content because with my Pluralsight, like with Pluralsight, if I get content in Pluralsight, I would rather go for that one. But for Udemy, what I'm mostly interested in is okay, what are some of the theories people are trying to preach about when it comes to this topic? What are some of the topics or objectives they are trying to me? So I can pick a topic. I can say, let's say ASP.NET Core. So just go to Udemy, type .NET Core, see a host of courses like being shown to me. Then I'm like, okay, with each individual of them, what is common? If the common factor I can find that particular common factor's definition in YouTube, I'll go for YouTube. If the Pluralsight job does it very well, I'm like, cool, this is great for me. But occasionally, or once in a while, you may see something in Udemy which sounds like unique, and you may not have necessarily seen that, right? So I can give an example. There's a particular course in Udemy about becoming a very great software architect, right? So I was interested in software architecture. I was like, okay, how does a software architect work? So I had seen a course in Pluralsight, not so in depth, but it was at least okay for me. Then I went to Udemy. I started comparing. But I saw one particular course in Udemy where I felt the content was unique, and the depth of like stuffs the person like the guy was capturing was very unique to what I've actually been used to. So I paid for that course just to be able to see what is unique about that course that I can't pick out from other places like YouTube or my own Pluralsight subscription. And that's is when I decide to buy from Udemy or not. Basically, Udemy is like a final option. If I can't find anything, I can find something there. But that's like a final option. But basically, I go through Udemy just to make sure I can compare what are people talking about when it comes to this topic, when it comes to this subject. What is the theory around the whole thing, and see if I can pick similar concepts around.
Yeah, I think I really like your strategy around getting what you learn on Udemy, because I think it's very very useful, because that's how I kind of learn. I look out for some content online and look at the structure or the curriculum, how
Yeah.
they plan to teach the content. Then I'll go according to that and study it elsewhere if I'm not really interested. And that's how I've probably used Udemy. Yeah, and I think that was how I actually started with software, development, because I saw some course syllabus, then took that course syllabus, and the rest was me and the internet, basically searching for content related to whatever syllabus they have out there to teach the content. Because my belief is if somebody has been able to come up with a course structure or a syllabus for to teach a particular course, then the person probably knows enough to put all of that together. And
Yeah.
coming from a place where you have to teach yourself everything, having something put together as an outline for you is very, very instrumental to your progress in some of the game. And so I'm very happy that you mentioned how you use Udemy. You use Udemy to know what is new in the industry and which direction to go in the industry. Or when you hear about technology, you want to know how to even approach learning that technology. So what are the important things that you should know concerning that technology. Is that what I'm getting? Am I getting that correctly?
Yeah, basically that's just the outline for everything.
Sure. Cool. And will you say that you're a DevOps fan or fanatic? Because most of the things or most of the things that you play with, you know, playing with Kubernetes, Mesos, and all of those things are stuff that I would say that a DevOps engineer, I'm saying a DevOps engineer, yeah, because there are school of thoughts that say that there isn't any role as a DevOps engineer. So I am quoting a DevOps engineer. So I mean, those are things that I'll find people who are in DevOps, learning and studying and improving themselves in there. Are you trying to tell me that aside software engineering, you want to do ops stuff, or ops is something that you're very interested in, or it's because of architecture? I know you could be.
So basically I talk about these things a lot of late because for the past 6 months I've been obsessed with software architecture, I would say. And if you're like me, who comes from like playing around startups, like one of the things you think about is how would my startup scale? How would I be able to handle growth in terms of like the load factor? And some of the things I do is that whenever I have these concerns, I try to ask myself, okay, what are the available solutions? Can I dabble in them? Can I see how it's implemented? Can I learn from that so that I can at least know that I have a future of solving a single problem, right? And another reason why I've also been so like I've been a talkative around DevOps stuff is the fact that some of the teams I've been working with for the past year, I get to do DevOps stuff and I get to like scale systems. I get to move with senior engineers who are architecting and building systems of that scale. And that is the reason why I kind of like dabble around those areas. But technically, I don't have a goal to be a DevOps engineer in the future. I see DevOps as something passive, not active. That's debatable though. But I have a goal of rather dabbling more into architecture and then getting much more deeper into that.
Okay, cool, cool. So at this point, we're gonna switch things around a little bit. We've got into the part where you show us something cool you're working on or something cool that you worked on to basically talk us through the process or your way of work. Then we can learn from things from a practical aspect. So we've done most of the talking. I know you like talking. I also like talking. If you don't if you don't end the conversation here, we'll talk throughout. Yeah, but I want us to make time for that part too because it's very important. Yeah, and so we'll be you're gonna have to at this point you're gonna have to switch to your screen. But before that, I'd like to mention that those who weren't with us when we started, having a chat with Adu Williams. He's very vocal in DevCongress. I mean, if you're also watching it, you're not in DevCongress yet, it will be a very good thing for you to join. DevCongress is where most conversations happen. And I know, and I strongly believe that after this hangout, the conversation is going to continue on DevCongress. And I'll make sure to share the link to sign up for DevCongress also in the description. Yeah. So William is going to show us what he has for us today, and we'll follow up with Q&A. So if you're watching if you have questions, you can add your questions to the chat right here on YouTube, and I'll get around to ask those questions. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So I guess I should share my screen just a sec. Okay, so let me switch over to this guy here. Great. So the project I'd like to talk about is the Barrel project I've been working on right now. And uh, the inspiration for writing Barrel is very simple. So I realized that in most of the applications I've been writing of late, and many developers will bear witness with me, is that we basically break down our application into three separate like layers, right? This is something basic to most computer science students. So we have our data layer, we have our business layer, and we have our presentation layer. Because most of us are used to doing MVC, we put an MVC like architecture into the presentation layer, and that is what we present generally. Most people are also getting used to using stuff like ORMs and data mappers, right? And for that reason, we've been using lots of like So like I would say libraries like Mongoose for Mongo and a few other libraries, right? But I had a problem of late, and I was like, okay, most of the projects I've been writing, I kept rewriting my data layer again. I kept writing repositories, I kept writing the CRUD implementations, and it was like a repetition over and over and over again. And another thing I also didn't like was the fact that some of these existing libraries had like a schema in place. So it's like define your schema in a data layer, and then when you define your schema, you bind your application to your schema. I personally didn't like the idea. So I felt like schema should go into business layer and should never be in the data layer. Your business should determine whatever entities it's going to be working with. So the problem was, how do I create a single solution which can encapsulate my data layer and that can be reused in any other project I'm going to be working on? Essentially, someone would say, I'm thinking of writing an ORM, right? But not necessarily an ORM. I wanted my ORM to sync whatever information I wanted to kind of like get up out there. So I was inspired to write this project I call Barrel. So a barrel is like a drum we put water inside, right? So the idea is that this is the drum that should hold everything that is called the database, right? This is technically or typically based on Kinex. Kinex is a query builder for Node.js applications. So I wanted to do something like this. I wanted to write how the entities in the database looks like, and I wanted to explicitly show how my database models are related to themselves. I wanted to have every detail written out like explicitly, so that when someone looks at my code, person can make sense of how my database looks like. Now, if I have this thing in place, the advantage comes in the form that with any project that I have, all that I have to do is to write up my own models or my own entities and then wire these things up and everything will now fall into place. Now, this particular project, because I'm basing everything on Kinex, I am at least from the basic level supporting four different types of databases. One, I'm supporting MySQL. Two, I'm supporting MS SQL. Three, I'm supporting Postgres. And four, I'm supporting SQLite. I'm looking like probably adding more features like a support for Mongo and other NoSQL databases as well. But let me switch to how the code looks like and just show a few aspects of the code to show how I'm trying to get the whole thing out. So this is how setting up uh, Barrel looks like. So with Barrel, you need a configuration, and in your configuration, you specify which clients you're going to be working with. Is it a MySQL? Is it going to be SQLite? Is it going to be Postgres or MS SQL? Then you specify the connection parameters, which includes the host, the user, the password, and the database. Then you create a database. So there is this DB class that I've already implemented in the code, and there is also another one we call the model. So in SQL land, the DB represents the database, right? And the model here represents the individual entities that you actually need to get your database working. I think I should increase the size. Yeah. So you would initially instantiate or create a new instance of your DB in code. Then you create instances of the models. So the models here represents all the individual entities that logically or perhaps business wise you are going to be handling. So in this particular example, I'm going to be handling for classes, for students, and then teachers. So after passing in the connection, you specify the table name. Now, one of the other features I'm looking into bringing on board, and I would just appreciate like help from the community or whatever, is for now, what you need to do is to write what you call a migration. So in this migration that I've actually written, this is how my database is going to look like. After executing this migration against database, everything that is needed from the table to the columns and the particular aspects of how the particular types of how the column should look like is already written in this migration script. Look, perhaps getting help from the community to automate this particular migration script as part of whatever you write here is something useful I'm looking at doing as well. Then this add model allows me to create a key within the database class and then associate whichever model I want to associate with. So even though the database table is called classes here, in my script, I'm going to be using the word class as the key. And so I can do something very simple as this database dot class, and then I will be able to do things and it should work for me, right? Now, what I've done in the model is very simple. So if you look at the structure for model, at least for now, I've already tried to implement most of the CRUD like implementations. And it works for me because once I have most of the CRUD implementations like done here, it makes my life easy. I can simulate most of the things ORMs are doing for me. But like I said, the system does not know whatever you are passing into your database. So your business model should dictate that particular schema. Then in your relationship, you append any extra like properties that you feel like, okay, once I create a relationship between the class model as a parent and a student model as a child, what other information do I need? Once the system sees that you've passed in just a parent identifier, the system can detect that this particular relationship is a one to many, right? And to be able to identify what class this the student model is associated with, it will have to use the class ID column. If you specify three props like the parent identifier, child identifier, and a junction table, it can infer from this that this is a many to many relationship. And so the model knows how to work around things and get things working. So this is currently one of the projects I'm trying to work with. And the fact that I'm doing this is just supposed to help me be able to get like a single data layer that can be reused over and over and over and over again. So I can just show a sample of how I try to implement this particular project. So for instance, in the project that I wrote here in core, you'll see from the package.json, and I will probably need to make this thing clear. This is a node project. You'll see that I am reusing the same instance within this particular project, right? So I'm just picking from the Git and I'm pulling everything out as a node package, like an npm package, and using the whole barrel thing in core. To get a better sense of what I'm trying to do, if you look at core, this is like the business logic of what I'm trying to implement. So you can see an example of what I've written here as in the form of say index, and in index, everything about this particular project is written here. So it's similar to what I showed earlier, but here is a particular business use case. So in this particular one, there are separate models that I'm going to be working with. And so I'm using the same barrel package, but it is helping me solve the problem of creating a data layer in this single project. And I can specify all the relationships I want. I can, when it's just like this, it knows it's just a one-to-one, but I'm going to be working on this also. And trying to get something like this makes me feel fulfilled. And I know most developers will feel fulfilled as well. And remember, when you have this, it means that you can actually work with, let me pick something that's kind of makes sense here, like this guy here. You can do lots of CRUD stuffs, right? And the CRUD stuffs are easy because right now you already have your barrel stuffs coming in, and then you can now do most of the creates, read, deletes, and update, and blah, blah, blah things. And for instance, you can see I'm using this on a database. I'm picking a particular model that I've added, which is link, and I'm calling something which barrel supports. So barrel is saying if you have like a tree or graph structure for your whole model, you can now call this on that, and then you should get your results and everything should work. I've written a few tests, and these are the ones I'm going to show. And it's not so much, at least for now, because I'm trying to get the functional test in place. And these functional tests are just a way to get the whole logic, like ensure that it's really tough, it's durable, and it can actually last for most of the production scenarios I can actually come up with. So this is basically the project I'm currently working on. And I don't know, anyone from the community can contribute to it, or anyone who actually wants to use Barrel for their own projects can just pull it up and then play with it. It's actually on GitHub. I can show that as well. I can show you. Just get to my repo and then AD Barrel. This is what the actual lies. And I'm looking to improve on documentation and make sure things are more like in depth as much as possible. So Francis, this is what I can show for today.
Okay, cool. That's cool stuff. So, what I would like to find out is, have you currently used this in a project?
Yeah, so the project I showed you is something I'm working on right now, and the project has various aspects. So for the project I'm building, it has a support for both mobile and web backends. So what actually it's this is how it's actually architected. You have like an API gateway for the web people, and you also have another API gateway for the mobile. So there are two API gateways which are written in happy.js. I didn't use Nginx or Express. I used Happy for the gateways. Then I have the core project that I showed you, which encapsulates all the business logic, right? Between the API gateway and the core project, there are service layers I'm looking to write and then make sure I can serve all the other various clients that I have. But right now, I integrated Barrel into this and it worked seamlessly without any problem.
Okay, cool. And you're saying you have this on GitHub and asking for contributions, right?
Yes. Yeah, I'm
Right.
looking for a country. So the main idea is that I want people to really have these open discussions with me about the vision of what Barrel is trying to accomplish, and then it will make more sense for them to now bring in more meaningful and active contributions into it.
Do you currently have documentations on for people who have interest in joining the project and contributing?
Yes. So right now I'm already working on a document like Google Docs, and I'm having everything captured in there. So if anyone shows interest, say via my Slack handle or via email, I'm more than happy to open talks with the person to share these docs with them and then have them contribute to the projects.
Yeah. So I'm keeping my eyes on the chat for questions, but as of now, I don't have questions on there. And so I don't know, maybe you've satisfied people.
Perhaps. I'm happy I did that.
You satisfied people so well, so they're free to come out and ask questions. I know Yao is watching, and I need Yao to ask questions. He sent a message earlier about some feedback that was in the video. Yeah, so I mean we can wait for like a couple of minutes to see if people come up with questions. Yeah.
Sure.
So whilst we're waiting for people to join and ask questions, I like to find out how was your. I know people ask me about getting into Andela. People asking for recommendations everywhere. Oh, yeah, how has it been for you? How did the process start for you? Maybe people will find an enlightenment to said okay, this was how it started for you. This is how you got recruited. These are the things that you needed to do. I think you're not here to speak for Andela, but sharing from your experience would be good for the community about how or what are the things that they need to know or do to be able to get into Andela. Yeah.
Sure, cool. So Andala has two offerings for developers in general, and I would say there are even more than two, but at least generically, let me say two. One is the fact that Andela wants people to join its fellowship. So if you are a developer and you don't mind for now living in Lagos, and you just want to grow from a junior developer to a world-class developer, I would advise that you apply for the fellowship. Go through the process of the like applying for the fellowship, and if you get into it, you would at least I can actually vouch for this that you get one of the best ever environments to become a world-class developer in Andela. Then, and the second offering I was talking about are the staff positions. So in the staff positions, there are people who work for Success, the guys who directly work with, they work closely with Andela's partners. And there are also other staff positions where people work for internal teams within Andela, which are also technical roles as well. So if any of those technical roles appeal to you, you can simply just apply for them and get into Andela through that. But basically, for the role that I'm currently playing as a senior consultant, Andela really needs more people coming on board. And if you think you have like 5 years experience developing and at least 2 years leading teams, these are the ones I can think of right now. You should feel free to just apply for the whole thing. Mostly you will be tested technically to see that you are technically sound because at least to have been in the industry for 5 years means that you have a certain standard, and then to have had like a 2 years TTL experience. If I say TTL, I mean technical team lead experience, means that you know how to manage people and then manage engagements and then make the best out of these particular engagements. So people of that qualification should also feel free to apply. And I'm sure once they prepare well, it should go well. You would probably want to look at your technical aspects, make sure technically you are sound. You don't look at how well you solve problems and how well you understand software development, how solid your basics are, and hopefully you will go through the process and then make it.
So do you have to have a certain number of a certain years of experience before you can apply, or fresh out of college, you feel like you have the chops, you can apply?
So for now, if you say you're fresh out of college and you'd want to apply as a senior consultant, honestly, it will be difficult. Uh, so I would encourage that if you're fresh out of college and you claim to have experience, then you would have to. It will really be strange. It will really be strange. So I would say fresh out of college, apply for the fellowship if possible. But if you have the experience in the industry, say 5 years, and you can vouch for that, you really think you have solid basics, honestly, just apply as a senior consultant, pick the Ghana jobs, and work well. So I can share Andela's job here. I can put it in the chat, but I don't know whether the general public is going to see that. But I can at least share that and have people look at it.
Yeah, they will see.
Okay.
So Douglas is asking a question. He wants to know what your job at Andela entails. So what does your job at Andela entail? So basically, what's your job description? What do you do at Andela?
My job
Are you
description.
allowed to share details of what you do at Andela?
Perhaps some, but don't worry, I'm okay with the question. So for now, what we normally do is that we work with Andala's partners as embedded engineers, or let me say extended engineers, right? So mostly we are remote engineers, and Andala's partners live on the other side of the world. My current partner lives in New York, so I wake up every day setting up and then trying to be in sync with them. So I join meetings with them, I pick up tickets from their board, and I work on solving these tasks. I do have lots of discussions with the BAs, PMs, and engineering leads with them. And just as every developer does, I do the same, right? There are also times where I also kind of like mentor engineers on the same like partner engagement and even outside. And that is also some of the things I do in Andela. And on the other side, there are certain things like interviews that I do. I do once in a while and also do assessments when people are looking for promotions within Andela. So this is basically like an overview of my day to day in Andela.
So what time do you start work and what time do you close?
So basically, if I have interviews or assessments for people looking for promotion scheduled, I normally push them to 10 a.m. in the morning. So I wake up like 8. I'm not saying I sleep and wake up like 8 though, but I prep myself at 8 a.m. But at least I don't work actively at 8. I try to cover my own stuffs at 8 and then get actively into work around 10 a.m. and I close at 6 p.m. People think that may be too much, but I don't know. But that's my general routine 10 a.m. in the morning and I personally close at 6 p.m. But I know for different senior consultants, they have their own schedule. And some people prefer working from 2 p.m. to like 10 p.m. or like 11 p.m. That's up to them and whichever partner they are working with.
Okay, so in your experience, how is it like to stay in Ghana and work remotely?
Yeah, the remote experience is it's nice, even though it has its own challenges. Let me talk about some of the positives. You get to work in the comfort of your home. Things are more relaxed for you. There is no office pressure. Even though there are distractions, but not much, as in how things are in the office when you may see somebody doing this, somebody calling you, somebody needing your help here, blah, blah. The distractions are a little less, I feel. But when it comes to the negative aspects, it's when you kind of like get to you miss your team. It's like you don't get that team bonding that you get when you're in the office because you were alone at home. Some of the things I do is that I placing requests to have coffee times with my people, and then we sometimes have it around Fridays, every Friday around 2:30 p.m. Ghana time to like 3 Ghana time, 3 p.m. So within that 30 minutes, we just talk about generic stuff. I can talk about my family. I can talk about Ghana. I can talk about the things I'm doing. Anybody can talk about anything. They can talk about coffee. We even talk about milk and whether taking expired milk is good or not. We talk about anything just to make sure we're able to establish this team bonding like among ourselves.
Okay. So interestingly, we have your Oga here, and your Oga has a question for you. He's saying, how do you get into software development?
So, like I was saying earlier, I had this friend who gave me this inspiration by showing me his calculator application, and then showing me how things work. That guy kind of helped with the beginning by giving me resources, and everything I picked up was self-taught. So I taught myself programming from 2009 till today, and I still teach myself because I still have lots of things I'm always learning and I'm always trying to understand.
Okay. And so when I said your guy, people who don't know, his guy is Edem Kumoji. He's our guy. Yeah. So there's another question here. What's your typical day like?
So I think I went through. So I'm like, I wake up at 6. If I have home chores to do, I go through them. If I don't, and I have like some prepping to do for interviews, I sit down and then go through them after cleaning up, though, like bathing, brushing, stuff like that. Then I do all those prepping around, like I start around 7 a.m. to like 8 or 9, doing those prepping, trying to go through documents that I may need. And if I have assessments or interviews around 10, I go through them and then I conduct them. Normally they last around 3 hours or a minimum of 1 hour, depending. Then at 12, I get busy. That's when, if I did like assessments and interviews in the morning. If not, I start around 10 and then I start going through repositories, trying to look at my day's task from the board. And then I mean, when I say board, I mean my Kanban board. And then I pick up a ticket I'm interested in for the day. I mean, I'll normally go for the one with highest priority and then start working on them. At 12, I start getting into meetings and my day gets much more busier. But I break around 12:30 to around 2 to take lunch and probably up, refresh for a while. Then at 2:20, I pick up stand up, and then at 2:30, I do what we call yesterday I learned, where the team meets together to share some of the new texts we've found or some of the new tricks we've learned. That lasts for like 30 minutes, and the rest is like serious hardcore coding where I focus on my work and I get to accomplish tasks till around 6 p.m. From 6 p.m., if it's a Friday, I start thinking of plans, whether I'm going for a live band to chill and distress myself. If it's a different day, I start putting things together for the next day, like trying to document everything that I've been able to accomplish for the day and then see what I can do for the next day and what I need. If I need to learn new things, I probably start prepping myself, finding resources around that time and see if I can go through them for a while. That's typically how my day looks like. But during the weekends, I spend my time with my wife. That's wife time.
Oh, and there's a question from Francis. Francis is asking, can you suggest a few tips for newbies on how to master the craft?
Yeah. So that is something I normally want to talk to newbies about. One of the things is that for newbies, there is so much information. It's almost like there's information overload. They hear so many things. I can give an example. You start into JavaScript, and all that you hear is there's React, there's Angular, there's Vue, there's so and so, there's Knockout, there's blah, blah, blah. There's so much information. What I would say is don't rush into these frameworks and libraries. Don't rush into them. Try to understand the language in itself. Try to ask yourself questions. Then when you think you have gone through the language itself, you know the various outlines of what makes up the language, and then you've really mastered the craft. Try building things from scratch yourself. At least try one thing. For instance, you may have heard of Express and you want to build like a Node.js backend. Instead of using Express, use the HTTP modules in Node itself. Try to understand how Node internally has provided these tools to you, and then try to build your own web framework. It may be tough, but at least by the time you finish doing this, or you get as far as possible, you understand how Express work, how Happy works, how Core works, and how these host of like frameworks work. And it will be easier for you to appreciate them better. And when using them, you will use them well with better expectations from those frameworks. So I'd say just don't rush into doing things because you've just heard everything. Pick up from the basis. Another advice is go to HackerRank. Start solving algorithm questions. Start solving data structure questions. Start solving database questions. They may be trivial and may not make sense to you, but those building blocks will become what makes you a very good developer when you start building real solutions for real companies. That is my advice for these guys. And I would say instead of watching lots of videos, I don't know, it depends on what each and everyone likes. People like more videos. I would say read books as well on the side. There are some information videos may not capture, but books may document them. So you might, after watching your videos, go through books, just go download these books and then read through them again to make sure that the information you picked from the video is the same thing captured in the document, or is there other aspects of the information which you may benefit from knowing? That is one of the advice I would want to give to these guys.
Okay, cool. There's another question from Adam, and Adam wants to know what's the biggest mistake you've ever made as a software developer?
The biggest mistake I've ever made. Okay, I would say the biggest mistake as a software developer was the fact that I crashed someone's server. I I went online. I was supposed to scale the whole thing, and I messed things up. And after messing things up, instead of probably cleaning out well, I started lying on that. That wasn't healthy, and that's not something I'd want to encourage people to be doing. But aside that, I've had like some cool times on that same server.
Cool. So was it a problem that you went in to fix, or you were deploying a solution or some software and ended up messing up stuff?
Yes, it was like a deployment, and I I bashed it out. I would say. So something I would say wasn't good, and something I don't want to ever go through again. Right? There are other times I would say I also used. I also had a poor judgment when I had somebody on my team. I think it was back in 2014, and I took the person out of the team. It was like a poor judgment when it came to decision making. So I was supposed to make the person do a particular job, and when the guy submitted the work, the guy had messed things up. Right, instead of like picking him up, and I made his judgment of firing this guy out of the company, and that I would say wasn't like very good.
So
That was
I
very
have
good.
a story to share on that also. I came close to firing one guy, but I took a different route. So I decided to mentor him, and eventually it turned out so well. And I mean, it was a very shocking thing for me. I was pleasantly surprised and that I made that decision not to fire the person. And I think the lesson here is for us to be patient enough and be more willing to help others and lift others when they are in their low moments. Or I mean, if you realize if you're working with somebody and you realize that this person needs help or needs to know something that the person doesn't know it yet, I think it would be best for you to try and help the person. And if you try your best and still doesn't work out, then you'll probably be justified to fire the person.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
so
can't agree more.
firing is not always straightforward. Yeah, I've
Yeah.
never had to fire anybody, so I don't relate. Yeah. Okay, cool. So there's a question from another Andela, Emmanuel Latte. He wants to find out what do you do to distress?
Yeah,
Maybe I
so
you.
I go dancing. That's it, man. I just go dancing. I just go to a live band where the music is loud. I take my wife along and I dance my stress off. I come home so tired and then I sleep.
I was going to say that. Oh, your wife will help you distress.
Yeah, my wife helps me to distress. That's like
Yeah, it's in the neighborhood. Okay, so whilst you're still waiting for questions, I'd like to give a shout out to the For Loop organizers. Yeah, so I mean this month there's going to be a meetup, For Loop meetup, and if you're watching, you should look out for it. Yeah, they recently put out a call for proposals and I think a call for talks. And I think maybe around this time they are reviewing the proposals to make selections for speakers for the meetup. Yeah. So ending of this month, there will be a follow-up meetup. And I think such events are good. DevCongress, we do have that, and it's meet other developers in the ecosystem to learn from them and pick up some experience because it's not everything that you can pick up from videos or books. Sometimes you need to meet real people, talk to them, learn from their experiences. And that's basically the premise for having the exchange. You have the exchange so that you can learn from people. And so we do hope that you keep on, or you subscribe to the DevCongress YouTube channel and get notifications when we have something coming up for DevCongress or for Dev Exchange. Yeah. So I think no, there aren't any questions now. And another thing too that I like to chip in is we're always looking out for people to talk to on the exchange. So if you're watching and you have a suggestion or you know somebody in the community that you look up to, you want to learn from the person, but probably you are afraid to reach out to the person or you're shy to reach out to the person to ask questions, or you're probably shy that you might end up asking stupid questions, which there isn't anything like that. Yeah, you can, reach out to me on Slack and let's or drop the name. Drop the name. You're working on the exchange website so that it will be very easy for you to suggest somebody or suggest a guest right from the website. Yeah, but for the meantime, you can just reach out to me on Slack or any of the DevCongress admins, and we'll be able to get that name listed and reach out or start the process around getting the person as a guest and for us to all learn from. And it's not an Andela affair. Maybe it seems like an Andela affair because Adam came and was saying that it seems or it sounds like we are having an Andela review. That's not what we are doing. So basically, coincidentally, we happen to both be working at Andela. Yeah. But next month we have a new guest or a different guest who isn't an Andelan. And subsequent months too. So if you don't know yet, the exchange is a monthly series. So we hold down the exchange every month. Every month we get a guest to come in to share his experience, his or her experience, and we learn from the person and go ahead in our career. Because the community isn't so very large, and it's best for us to discover each other and learn from each other in the process. So that's what we are hoping to achieve at DevCongress Exchange. There are no questions, so I'd like to release William to go and spend the rest of the time with his wife.
Yes,
And
man.
yeah. So thank you, William, for spending some of your time with us today. I really, for one, enjoyed our conversations and enjoyed the learnings that I had from this exchange. And we look forward to having you maybe at a meetup where we get to be able to touch you because here we can't touch you. We get to argue with you and go back and forth on issues. Yeah. So again, thank you for accepting the invitation to join the hangout.
Anytime. Anytime, man.
So that brings us to the end of the exchange for June. So July will be announced. In July will be all before July will be announcing the guest for next month, and we're looking forward to having somebody who can share his or her experience with us. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for your time. All right. It's a wrap.
Bye.
Bye.